Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Welcome to the March 2020 edition of InfluxData Community Office Hours. We're glad that you're able to join us. As a reminder, if you have anything that you'd like to ask as we go along, please feel free to use the Q&A option, which you'll see on your screen in the Zoom menu. This is, after all, a community call, so we want to encourage all of your questions, comments, and conversation. Just to introduce myself quickly, I am Michael Ellis, the new community manager here at InfluxData. So you'll likely be seeing and hearing a lot more of me in the future. For the last 6 years, I've been working at Mozilla on various projects and community programs. I started at InfluxData only a few weeks back, and I'm super excited to be on board and to be working to support the InfluxDB community. Additionally, on the call today is our awesome group of panelists and presenters. Today, we're joined by Russ Savage and Nate Isley from Product Management. Also with us today is Al Sargent, Product Marketing Head at InfluxData, and Chris Wolf from the Platform Engineering team. Thank you all so much for being here. And for any of our audience not able to join us live today, this call will be recorded and will be available on our YouTube channel for viewing later. Our first presenter today is Russ Savage, who will be sharing an InfluxDB Open Source update with us. Russ, would you like to introduce yourself to the group and take it away?
Sure. Hi, my name is Russ Savage. I'm a product manager here at Influx, working really closely with the open source community on a lot of our open source projects, and specifically the InfluxDB 2.0 open source beta that's been rolling out. So I'd love to give you guys an update on some of the cool stuff that's been coming out of our engineering team to make developing on the InfluxDB open source platform a lot easier. So if you want to, I'll just share my screen if you'd like.
Sure thing. I'll go ahead and stop sharing now.
And I can walk through a couple of different demos that we have here. So on last week, we released InfluxDB 2.0 Beta 6, which has some awesome new features. You'll notice when you log in, probably the biggest change is an overhaul of some of the UI capabilities and UI features. So you'll notice new graphics, you'll notice new colors, you'll notice kind of an overall kind of design aesthetic update, which makes everything feel a lot fresher and kind of connects all of our different products together a little better. Not the most interesting open source update, so I'll jump into some of the other stuff that's been going on. So behind the scenes, the tools team has been working on improving the developer experience using our CLI. And so we've introduced the notion of CLI Profiles, which are really handy when you're connecting to many different instances of Influx. So just to give you guys a little demo here, we have our Influx CLI command. We now have an option called config. So if I do config.h, I can, and I've got everything zoomed in a little bit so you guys can see, but it's actually making it harder for me to see. But actually, the config option lets you specify a number of different configurations for different influxes that you are connected to. So in this case, when I use the list command, you can see I've got 3 different instances that I'm connected to. One of them is one of our internal monitoring instances. The other one is my cloud account, and the other one is my local account. And you notice that there's a column called active here, and it's got a little asterisk next to my local host. So I know that that is where all of my requests are going behind the scenes. This means that I don't have to pass in an org parameter. I don't have to pass in a token parameter. Behind the scenes, the CLI just knows how to connect to my different instances. So in this case, I believe if I use the set US West -A, so now when I list my command, you can see that I've jumped over, and now all of my commands are being sent over to US West, my cloud account, which is awesome. So again, you can set this up to talk to any number of cloud or open source instances of Influx. makes it super easy to work across different environments. The other thing that the team's been working on is improving the experience of writing Flux inside and outside of the browser. So when I jump over to VSCode, we have an awesome Flux extension that's been recently updated with some pretty cool features. So you can install that from the VSCode marketplace. Or I think if you start editing a .flux file, it'll automatically prompt you to install it. But it comes with a couple of different capabilities, which are really useful. So one, you can define one or many InfluxDB instances to connect to. So you see I've got the same set of InfluxDB connections here. I can add a new connection if I'd like, which lets me select either Influx2, the latest, or I can even connect to an Influx1 instance that's running that has Flux enabled, which is super useful. Name it, host name, token, all of that sort of stuff, and I can save that connection. And that lets me then quickly execute queries against it. So for example, here I can run this buckets query, and I can run that against my local host, and if I want to, I can also run that against my my US West cluster. I get a couple different ones, right? So again, you can execute queries against any number of influxes. Again, trying to help the developers write queries. The other thing that's really cool is we now have auto completion capabilities in the UI, or in your IDE. So in this case, instead of having to type out all of the individual Flux queries, when I start typing from, I can see help functions getting populated, and when I tab, it auto completes and gives me the option of entering a bucket. Let's see if I can get this to go. Ideally, I'd be seeing a list of buckets here. Let's see here. Oh, there we go. So again, still working to improve all of this stuff, but again, trying to, in this case, this plugin is actually going out, querying my my US West instance for the same set of buckets, and now I'm able to select and actually pull that data in. So it auto completes and makes it really easy to write queries. In this case, range, I can do 1 minute. I hit tab, it jumps to the outside of the function. Super handy. And again, filter, it'll automatically populate the parameter that I need here, making it much easier to write actual Flux queries. So we continue to update that and make it better. Now that we have connections into your different data stores, we'll be able to populate that with different tags, different measurements, make it really interactive for building queries. And the really awesome thing is that since we're using the same editor that they use in VS Code, we're using that in the browser. So this capability is also available in the script editor here. So when I hit from, I get a similar list of buckets right in my browser. So again, trying to create that Flux editing experience wherever you are. We continue to make awesome progress on improving the Influx package command. And for those of you who are new, the package command is what powers all of the InfluxDB templates that you may have heard about in our community Slack and blog posts. So InfluxDB templates, a way to import and configure your Influx instance for monitoring a specific stack. We have a community templates repository that's open to everyone here, and allows you to contribute different templates that you've built. Recently, we've had user add some currency exchange rates. Actually, I think one of our engineers added this, but super easy to then import this into your Influx instance. We can actually add it directly from a URL, which is really cool. So back to my CLI, I can look at the pkg command, help. Gives me a bunch of information on how to use this command. And one of the options is -u. So again, if I want to make sure I set my set this to be my local instance, so I know that I'm connecting there. And now I'm going to use the URL to actually start loading that data in. So again, I didn't have to download or install anything, and what you get is basically a summary of all of the things that it's going to try to install into your instance. I can hit yes, and I can see that all of that stuff got loaded in. And when I jump back to my instance, I should see dashboards. I've actually loaded this before, so I've got 2 of them. One of them was just modified a few seconds ago. I've also got a new bucket, I believe, for that data as it comes in. My Quandle bucket. So a lot of awesome capability in there with the templating feature. So those are just a couple of things that we released with the latest beta 6 in our open source. So I encourage you guys to load it up, download it, start checking it out, and giving us feedback on how everything is going.
Great. Thank you
And
so
it
much,
looks
Russ.
like we have one question from Vegeta. And Russ, I'll just read out the question if you don't see it already. Is this
Sure.
VSCode? And is Flux an extra plugin?
Yep. So that is VSCode, and the Flux plugin is available on the VSCode extension marketplace. So let me just search for VSCode Flux. It should come up. If you also just search for Flux within the VSCode extension list, you should see it there as well. So ready to go. And as you're using it, please post your feedback in the community. We've got a team working on it. We'd love to improve it with you guys. That's it for me. I'm going to pass it back over to Michael, who's going to continue with the next presenter.
Great. Thank you for that update, Russ. And if anyone has any other questions for Russ, he'll be hopping off shortly, but we'll be certain to circle back. Feel free to add those to the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that we get answers to you. Up next on the call, we have Al Sargent, who'll be sharing what is possible using Flux for geotemporal queries. Al, would you like to introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. My name is Al Sargent, and I do product marketing here at InfluxData. And been with InfluxData for a few months now, and been really enjoying learning about this product and all the stuff it can do. And so really excited to share with you what we can do around geotemporal queries. So if I could go ahead and share my screen. There we go. Can you guys see that?
We can.
All right. So geotemporal, what does this mean? We'll do a little bit of slides and we'll do a little bit of demo. And I know this is high level here, but we'll drop down into some code in just a second. So first of all, just so we introduce what is this concept of geotemporal data, it's basically time series data, which we've, of course, handled in InfluxData for a long time, and then with location added to it. So for example, if you think of a windmill, such as those of Siemens, it's generating for each windmill information on how much energy it's generating, what's the quality of the machine, but it also has a geographical location. Similarly with Tesla, another customer, they generate information how much voltage is coming out of any particular roof, but then that also has a certain location. Or Bevy, they have these water dispenser machines. They like to show how much flavoring is in the machine over time and how that's going down, and when a tech needs to go out to replace the flavor modules that are in the water dispenser. But then when that does go down, it's good to have a location of that so the tech knows exactly where to go, what office to go in. So the thing is with IoT, it's all about things, and all those physical things have locations. So here's how we actually address this. So what it is we have a new Flux library called experimental/geo. Now, even though it's called experimental, we very much, it's called experimental because we're going to be, we anticipate making some changes to it as we get feedback from folks. But it's not like it's going to be going away. This is something that we're very much committed to as a company. And so if you look at how we're doing this, you can, if you read through the Flux code, you'll see it starts off pretty, first of all, we have the import function. That starts out pretty straightforward. We do a from statement with our bucket. We then talk about our range. We talk about the measurement we're going after. This could be, for instance, the amount of voltage in a solar array, or it could be the amount of fluid flavoring level in a bevy machine. Something that the thing that you're trying to measure. And then here, what we want to do is we want to filter down. We call our Geo Package, and we want to filter the rows. And so this filter rows function can take in different types of parameters. In this particular case, where we want to get a circle, what we do is we pick the center point of the circle, which is this lat long, and then we figure out the radius. In this case, 20 miles across. And then we have this strict comment, strict equals true. We're going to get to that in a second, explain what we mean by that. But as you can see, what this will do is this will go ahead and fill out all the data points within this circle region. And this, again, this could be the the measurement, whatever it is you're measuring, the voltage from a solar panel, etc. So we can do circles. We can also do rectangles. And so here, everything is exactly the same. But then in region, what we're doing is we're picking out our minimum latitude, which is the bottom of the box, our max latitude, the top of the box, min longitude, the right edge, and at least in the Western hemisphere, and max longitude, which will be the Western edge in the Western hemisphere. So that's how that works. And then we can also do polygons. And so here we're using the simplest form of a polygon, in this case, a triangle. And what we're doing is we're just taking the lat long of each of these 3 points. But you could imagine this being much more complex if it's, let's say, following the contours of a particular shoreline or other geographic area, let's say along certain roads or rivers or other physical boundaries. And so, we'll have these collection of points be quite complicated as you're mapping out very complex polygons. So those are that's how these queries look. Now, we talked about this strict being off. What happens if strict is off? What happens is you get a little bit of leakage outside the boundary. And that comes through the technology we use, which is something called S2, which I'll explain a little bit. But basically, you can have, if your cells are really big, or not really big, but if they're fairly big, then they won't be they won't be perfectly aligned with whatever shape it is. So you can basically set strict equals false. Things will run a little bit quicker. You'll get a little bit of leakage outside, or you can say strict equals true. What that'll do is that'll give you this initial result, and then it'll do a second pass on the results and put everything exactly within whatever shape you specify. So it's simply up to you in your use case, how strict do you need to be? You can be less strict and save on CPU cycles, or more strict, which will take more in CPU cycles. So this is available today. You can get it on, basically you can look up more in the documentation. On our docs, you can, long URL, but it's our v2 docs reference inside Flux in the experimental area, and then choose the Geo package. Now there's a few functions, but you'll typically use these. Many of these are primitives, like S2 cell ID token, very much a primitive that we're putting out there. People can use if they want. But most of the time, you're going to be using geo.filter rows, and this will filter down your tables by the geographic criteria of fitting within a certain shape, like we've outlined above. You can also do tracks, which will show you the start point and end point, which is useful if you're tracking something that moves, like a taxi, a rideshare, an airplane, etc. So now let's go ahead into a demo. And so what we have here is, let's go ahead and look at, so let's do West Long Island. And so let's look at what this looks like. So here we have, again, we're pulling in our Geo package. We have the data in Geo bucket V6 we're pulling out for the last year. The measurement we're pulling out is the taxi. And the region, we have a box region, min, max, latitude, and longitude. And we're converting this to rows. And then what we're doing is we're limiting this to 50 rows initially, just for the sake of keeping this running quickly. And then we're dropping the start and stop columns. You can see how that's been plotted on this map. So a couple thoughts here for you. One is that probably a good idea to do a limit when you're just first experimenting, if you have a large data set. So that's if it's grid only. Now, what if we do grid plus strict? Well, then what we'll do is we will have the, if you go over here, you'll start to see what we do is we do this initial filter. And again, this is using the primitive of geo.gridFilter. We convert it to rows, and then we filter a second time to make sure everything is within that box. And then if we look at how this looks with a circle, we'll just do grid and strict. Again, 1 year, and you can see we're just passing in the lat, lon, and radius, kind of like we showed before. And if we do a polygon, you can see here we have, oops, let's get that over here. You can see our triangle, and we're simply passing in our points as we showed before. So I want to check here. Are there any questions that have come through thus far?
We did have one question that came in during the presentation. Mohsen writes, when doing joins using Flux and then outputting the join data into a new bucket, is there a way to see the raw data before it gets stored inside the new bucket? For example, I'd like to know what is being treated as a field and tag before it gets stored in a separate bucket.
Let's see, I think, so yeah, one of the things with Flux in general is you can go ahead and, I think if I'm understanding the question correctly, and tell me if I'm not, but one of the great things with Flux is that each one of these pipe forward operators essentially allows you can comment any of them out, and you can switch into the raw view, the raw data view. And when you switch into the raw data view, then you can get a sense for what the shape of your data looks like. So yes, you can see what it looks like before you do the geo filtering if you want.
The one other thing I'd like to add, this is Russ, you can also use the yield function in Flux to get a snapshot view of the data at any point in time during the query. So if you want to use, and you can use multiple yields in the same Flux query. So if you're curious what it looks like before it goes to the two bucket, you can actually insert a yield just after the range here on line 3. And you'll be able to see that, that information. You can also comment out lines in the editor. So line 4, you can use 2 forward slashes in the front of that line, comment it out, and test it with that yield.
Yeah, and the great thing is because this is the Monaco editor that's in Visual Studio Code, certain Visual Studio Code keyboard commands will work. So command, and on the Mac, command / just comments or uncomments. So that's really handy. When you're going through your queries, you'll find yourself, doing this quite a bit. And then there was a question on how do we see the raw data view? So right here, so what I did here was, this is a little query I ran. So we have this publicly available data source, and we're pulling in data for the past year. And then we're basically putting in my GeoTemporal bucket for my organization. And so if we want to see the raw data for that, we just click on raw data, and you can see all the raw data that we have. So, and you can see here, start, stop, and let's see if we can pick out some. We have the S2 cell ID. So this will be something to keep in mind as we go forward. What is this S2 cell ID? We'll explain that in just a moment. But yeah, you can see the measurement is taxi, it's the endpoint, and so forth. So, okay, any other questions? 2 more questions, that's great. Okay, So Mohsin got that, and good. Okay, glad we're able to answer your questions. That's what we're here for. All right, so let's go ahead back to the presentation. And I want to go ahead and just go under the covers. What is explaining how this technology works. So what we use is we use a technology. This is not our technology. This is open source technology, but something called S2. And the simplest explanation is that S2 cells divide up the Earth into regions, and you have a unique ID on each one. So for instance, if we go back here, these are S2 cell IDs, and this is 89C2444, right? That's a pretty big number. And the reason we have a fairly large number here is that you can get down. So if you have longer, so you can have shorter cell IDs if your use case doesn't require as high resolution geographically. The smallest cell level is level 30, and that's 6 by 9 millimeters. So that's about the size of an airing, a small airing. The next level up, level 29, is the size of a US penny. And so, you want to be smart about it, right? If you don't need to go down to the resolution of an airing, if let's say, because think of that, your laptop, look at down at your laptop keyboard, you're going to have like probably 100 or 300 of those right there. So, if you need to only go down to the level of, let's say, a table, that might be a level 27 or something like that. And if you go to this website, s2.io, again, this is not us, this is open source, all open source. You can see here your S2 cell statistics, and you can see the different levels. So level 30, 7 times 10 to the 18th power of cells on the Earth's planet, or on the Earth's surface, excuse me. And you can see here, if you need to go to 3 meters by 5 meters, that's level 21, for instance. So, and that still gives you 26 trillion cells on the Earth's surface. So that's a little bit of S2. And let me go back to my presentation here. And so back to strict mode. So why did strict have that leakage? Well, if you had a sort of big S2, if you had a lower level of S2 filtering, so therefore bigger cells, you might get some cells that are outside of your bounding box, circle, or polygon. And so if you do need to get things right within, then you have two options. One is to use smaller S2 cells, but that's going to require more storage because you have bigger S2 cell IDs, or you can set strict equals true. Strict equals true, you'll do an initial result like non-strict filtering, and then later go through each row in that and make sure that it fits within your bounding box. So you want to experiment to find the right trade-off between storage and CPU, depending on your use case. If you want to find your required cell size, you can go to this URL, s2.sidewalklabs.com/region cover. Make sure you have the trailing forward slash there. And then you can basically drag things along and figure out, what type of resolution you can get down to. And then we also have Telegraph 114 will actually add the S2 cells to your data on ingest. And so this is a lot quicker because it basically makes it so that InfluxDB doesn't need to calculate the S2 cell ID on the fly based on latitude, and longitude. We basically decorate the data with that on the way in. So it's optional, but it's a really good idea to do this. And you can see it's very easy to, like anything in Telegraph, it's really easy to create. You just have processors.geo. And so it's called S2_geo here, but notice that it's processors.geo. And then you plug in this. The tag key is going to be called S2 cell ID. And then the cell level you just set, again, based on what we saw earlier. And you can look up how tight this resolution is. Your queries will run faster. And we expect this rest when do we expect 114 to drop? I think it's in about a week is the latest information that I had. So a few other commonly asked questions. Where can you get it? So you can get it in the Flux Geo Library, and that's going to be in InfluxDB 1.8, open source and enterprise, InfluxDB Open Source 2.0, beta 6 plus, which is that's available now in InfluxDB Cloud. And then Telegraph 14, again, in a week that'll have the Geo processor. No extra charge for this. And here's where you can find more information. The open source repo for obviously with Influx. And then you can also get the S2 Geo library here, and then more documentation as well. So that is what I had. Any other questions on that? No open questions. Okay, good. So I'm going to stop sharing, Michael, and hand it over to you.
That's great, Al. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.
Let me know when you can see the slides.
We're good. We can see them.
Great. And one last look here. It looks like we were able to answer all the questions. So thank you again, Al, for presenting. We really appreciate it. That was an awesome talk. I'm going to go ahead and progress through the slides. You have to forgive me. I'm going to be going back over the slides that you presented. Great. So if you would like to get more involved in the conversation and in our community, we have some great ways for you to do that. I encourage you to hop over to the InfluxDB community portal, which can be found at community.influxdata.com. It's a great place to poke around, find help, learn solutions, share ideas, and follow discussions. We also have a Slack workspace that is open to our community. It can be accessed via influxdata.com/Slack. This is a great place to meet other community members, share your knowledge, and get help from other community members and staff. Even if you don't have a support issue or a technical question, we encourage you to come by. You can join the community channel. It's a great place to get to know people, introduce yourself, socialize with other members of the community. We're super active on Slack, and we always love meeting new time series enthusiasts. So I really encourage everyone to check that out if you haven't already. Also, for all the Redditors out there, we have InfluxDB subreddit available for you in case you want to pop over and check that out. The InfluxDB subreddit is off to a good start, and I look forward to seeing it grow more over time. And up next, we have some community announcements and resources that we'd like to share with everyone on the call. First up is our time series meetup. For those of you that are not already familiar, time series meetups are events for everyone, including all those individuals who are passionate about time series data and how it can be utilized, as well as those curious about the topic and interested in learning more. The time series meetups take place around the globe, from the Bay Area to Bangalore. If you're interested in participating, hop over to meetup.com after the call and check for a time series meetup in your area. It's a great place to learn about upcoming events and activities. Of course, in light of the recent developments around COVID-19, we made the decision and we'll be postponing all of our in-person meetup events until at least the end of April. As things progress and as we learn more, we'll continue to evaluate the timeline and adjust as needed to ensure the safety and well-being of our community. But just because things are scary right now, it doesn't mean that our sense of community needs to be taken away from us. So in lieu of in-person meetups, we'll be hosting virtual time series meetups via Zoom webinar. The virtual meetups are scheduled to take place March 31st this month and next month on April 30th. We hope you can join us at an upcoming virtual meetup, complete with all the knowledge sharing that you've come to expect. The good news is that there's no hand sanitizer required for a virtual meetup. The bad news is that the events will be bring your own beer. And community office hours. So if you're on this call currently, you're probably familiar with our community office hours or you're checking it out. We do hold our community office hours once a month, and we would love for you to stop in again. We have different folks from InfluxData joining us and sharing on different topics. So be sure to check back and see what we'll be presenting next month. Office hours are scheduled for the third Wednesday of every month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So if you're interested in learning more or would like to ask more questions, Feel free to come back next month. We're always excited to see community members returning to the call. Also, we have our community showcase, which is a central resource for all things community. Here we'll list upcoming events where Influxers are going to be, such as upcoming talks by our DevRels. We'll also list upcoming webinars and interesting articles that have been shared by the community, as well as links to other initiatives that we have for our community. So it's a great resource if you are looking for ways to connect with the community where you live or online as well. Also, we wanted to share an update on Influx Days, the conference that we organize. Influx Days London was originally scheduled to take place June 8th to 10th. In light of the recent developments around the coronavirus, COVID-19, we are reformatting the conference into a virtual event. The event will now be held in July, with more details on the exact timing to come shortly. While this is an unfortunate development, the safety and well-being of our users is a top concern for us, and this adjustment was needed in order to protect our community from unneeded travel and exposure. However, the San Francisco instance of Influx Days is still currently planned to take place on schedule, which is October 20th to 22nd. Hopefully by then, the world will have returned to some semblance of normal. And for the San Francisco conference, we are still looking for great speakers for Influx Days SF. So if you're interested in presenting, please hop over to influxdays.com to learn more and submit your CFP. Do one last check for questions here, and it seems like we've been able to touch on all the ones that we have from our live viewers. Thank you all for joining us today for the March edition of our Community Office Hours. We hope you can join us again April 15th for our next call, and we look forward to seeing you there.